I got another email. And this is maybe will lead to some type of pithy conversation, Brian, for just a few minutes.
Why start now?
Well, we got to change this tempo sooner or later. It's from my old friend Chester Snapdragon McFisticuffs. You remember him. He's from Cold Spring, Kentucky.
You know, sadly, I do remember that name, actually. Yeah. Yes.
Well, he sent an email, and actually, he included you on this too, so I don't feel too bad. But anyway, I saw a post on X, formerly Twitter, from ESPN reporter Mark Raimondi, in which he says that Brie Garcia told him Bryan Danielson ignored her. Why can't she just be Brie Danielson? Why does everybody have to have a goddamn different name these days? And then they've got aliases when they're on camera. I'm just editorializing now.
She's embracing her Latino side.
Well, she was a Bella.
That was when she was embracing her. That was when she was embracing her Italian side. Maybe one day she'll get to her white guy from the Northwest side.
She ought to just embrace herself in the middle, and she'd probably be happier. But anyway, he says that Brie Garcia told him Bryan Danielson ignored a broken orbital bone until his nose went numb. I might get some shit for this opinion, Chester says, but I don't think Danielson ever should have been cleared to wrestle after his initial retirement. If I had been WWE, I never would have cleared him after discovering he was hiding concussion-related seizures in order to continue wrestling. This is something, I don't even think we talked about it, but a couple of years ago he said that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
He'd had a few seizures, but he didn't want to tell anybody because he thought he'd get better or whatever. He says, I know they caved in when it became clear he was trying to leave, but if it had been my call, I never would have allowed it after realizing I couldn't trust him to be 100% honest about his health. Of course, Danielson ultimately left WWE in pursuit of more freedom, and I feel a solid argument could be made that AEW is more lax when it comes to medical issues and restricting talents in ring versus the WWE. I know everyone is ultimately responsible for their own destiny and well-being, but at what point, if any, should a promoter step in to save a wrestler from themselves? It's not that I hate Danielson, but I feel like, in conjunction with being a highly respected technical wrestler, he's also been incredibly stupid with his health. So the bottom line is, to what extent is a promoter responsible for protecting a wrestler from themselves? And have you ever been thrust into a position where you had to intervene with a wrestler you were overseeing? Oh, talking about Danielson first.
Great question.
Yes, thank you, Chester. But talking about Danielson first, everybody likes him, and nobody wants to see him get hurt, and that's all he's been for the past year and a half is hurt. And I know he's still wanting to keep doing something and modifying how you do it so that you are not taking an unnecessary risk and can still do it is different from still wanting to do something and do it exactly the same way you always have, even though you're fucking hurting yourself with more and more frequency, more and more often, more and more severity, whatever the fuck, especially after he was off how long with the concussion deal to begin with? You know, there's always been, as guys got older and they got hurt, or Ray Stevens couldn't do when he was 50 what he could do when he was 25. But they learned to not do the things that put them at risk so they could still keep doing what they did for a living because they did it for a living.
The problem is a lot of the fans who became wrestlers after becoming super fans through tape trading or seeing stuff from Japan specifically romanticize the brutality of wrestling. Whether it's in the training or whether it's in the headbutting or things that just don't seem logical, that don't actually go with what professional wrestling's supposed to be, which is a work, which is working together, not hurting yourself.
Well, and you just put that so no wonder they pay you the big bucks.
What have
You
you
put
heard?
that so good, just so briefly when you said the fans that were tape traders that got in the business that romanticized the violence or brutality. 20 years before that, when I got into business, it was the complete opposite. The people that were admired and were respected and coincidentally were in all the main events making all the money in 90% of the cases were the people that could make the shit look devastating and you'd never fucking feel them touch you. And that had been kind of the idea ever since wrestling became a thing that was somewhat controlled, as we mentioned earlier, by its own little, fucking commission type of goddamn hierarchy. And that was what you admired. And yeah, and if the top guy wasn't a guy who fit that category, in other words, somebody that had shit that looked devastating and you never felt him, then that meant that he was the fucking money drawer in the territory and you brought people in that fit that description to work with him. And that's it. But that's what everybody aspired, to. Oh, a night off. How is it working with so and so? It's a night off. That meant you would never feel it. He would never touch. He would never hurt you. He wouldn't take any liberties. But his shit looked great. And now they act like they're really going into a goddamn UFC octagon to fucking wage war with this friend where they know they're going to hurt each other, but they're not even going to really win anything in the end. They're just going to beat the shit out of each other for real in a work and in a work. So
they can go in the back and be happy about what they did. And the reaction from the fans, a lot of the examples MJF's talked about in some of those, I think, media scrums and stuff, you probably could have got a bigger reaction, a better reaction from doing simpler stuff. But once you establish that you're the guy working those matches, there's no coming back. Danielson's never going to be able to work a different style. He's going to do this until he stops wrestling. But every match you see him in, if he doesn't get hurt, you're afraid he's going to get hurt. And it's because of the style he wrestles. And like you said, he's a very nice guy by all accounts. Guys really like him. He's went on, and he's never really not on, but on the mat, he's one of the most beautiful mat technicians I've ever seen. You can watch what he's doing, and it's amazing. You get entranced by what he's doing there. But he maybe doesn't make the best decisions. Which, goes into the question of why Tony Khan's putting so much faith into him. Nice guy. Maybe he doesn't make the best decisions for himself, and who knows about for others.
Well, and the first time I remember this happening, he's going to start getting the wrong kind of sympathy, I'm afraid. And when I say that, I mean, the first time I remember it happening, I've talked about it, it was Mick Foley. When he became Dude Love and he stopped taking all those bumps and he was like, am I shortchanging the fans? I told him, and it had started to be obvious this was something that was going on. The people liked him so much as a person. It had never been in history, even with the people that took the big bumps and Bobby Eaton or whether it was a babyface or a heel, the fans would never get uncomfortable thinking I'm worried for this fucking guy on a goddamn personal human basis, right? I mean, it's still with the babyface, you'd be cheering, but you wouldn't be like turned off to their match because you're afraid he's going to hurt himself. And that's what started happening with Mick. He was taking those bumps and doing those things that the people that really liked him and as a person, they were kind of, oh, I don't want to see him do that. And they were smarter to the business than ever before. And they knew that it was hurting him for real. And I think that Danielson, for the people that really love him and love this style of AEW or whatever, if he's had a broken face and a goddamn broken arm and a goddamn, what was the injury before the broken arm? Was that a concussion?
I think there was a concussion.
Or
There was the orbital injury. There was the arm injury.
yes.
I mean, when he first came in, he got hurt pretty quickly, didn't he? Like after a few
Well,
months.
but I'm not trying to jinx him, but the point is, if he still keeps doing this high risk stuff, the fans are going to start cringing instead of cheering, aren't they? When they say, oh shit, he's going to hurt himself again. Oh shit. You don't want that. And again, there's a reason why this business has been a work for 120 years. Because it's easier. You're manipulating people's emotions to buy a ticket to see this conflict. That's why they call it the wrestling business. But it doesn't matter what happens in the match between two people that nobody pays to see. It doesn't matter how good it is. You first want them to pay to see it, and you can manipulate that. And you can manipulate your finishes to help get a guy over or to necessitate a rematch that you can sell tickets to or whatever the case. And the reason why working developed, especially in the TV era when people were able to see closer, to pay more attention, is to minimize the damage to your body and maximize the way that you appeared to the fans. And the art of drawing money came from getting yourself and your physicality in the ring and your personality over with a wide variety of people as being something unique, something special, somebody to look forward to seeing or to look forward to cheering for or against. And you manipulate those personalities if you're a promoter, and the conflict needs to be believable enough to draw the witnesses in, the ticket purchasing patrons, and lead them to want to see more of this or similar, while at the same time not showing them every goddamn thing they could ever possibly see, or exposing that you're yanking their chain all along and the whole thing's bullshit. That's the goddamn concept of wrestling. And it's not about going out and performing the most death-defying, dangerous, crazy shit all the goddamn time that you go out there because it's fun for you and your friends. And the problem is that it used to be a situation where the guys were doing this for a living and they had to take care of themselves because if they didn't wrestle, they didn't get paid. And it's very modern and very convenient that guys get paid contract money now, regardless of whether they wrestle or don't wrestle or don't draw or whatever. And in the first generation of contracts like that 30 years ago, it bred a bunch of guys who'd come up in the territory system and felt ill-used by that very principle that they had to work no matter what. And so then took advantage of the guarantees and sat on their ass with hangnails and soaked the promoters for as much as they could get. But now they've taken on a different mindset where they have to be saying to themselves before they agree to do this shit to each other, well, this is going to be, wow, the people are going to go crazy and they're going to chant holy shit. And it's risky, but fuck, we think we can pull it off. But, nobody wants to get hurt, but at least we'll get paid at home in a cast or a sling or an iron lung. They have to be saying, who could talk any rational fucking human being into taking a Canadian destroyer off a ladder through a fucking table onto concrete, unless you know that if you can't wrestle for the next year, you're still going to get paid to be at home in fucking immobile plaster. Otherwise, you would have to say, fuck you, moving on. So that it's done the opposite. It's made these guys more apt to try to kill each other because they know their money's guaranteed, instead of fucking slacking off because all of a sudden they got guaranteed money. And there was another question. Have I ever had to intervene and I will answer this as briefly as possible. Besides asking guys and in some cases arguing with them, like when Steen wanted Mark Briscoe or Jay or one of the others, Mark, I think it was, to dive out of the balcony in Milwaukee and splash him through a table in the middle of the ring in front of 732 people, and debating a few of the guys in Ring of Honor about the wisdom of, similar stuff. I was lucky in Ohio Valley Wrestling because none of the guys were wanting to do this shit. And they didn't ever bring it up and pitch it for me to shoot it down because they didn't need to. They had an audience and they had a program that they were on, that they were over with, and they had quality fucking opponents and instruction. But in some cases, you will, when you're a booker or whatever, somebody wants to work hurt because they feel like, they don't want to let the town down, let the fans down, or they can gut through it or whatever. And you have to make the executive decision. Tracy, I'd love for you to work this spot show in goddamn Welch, West Virginia, but it's more important that you take a few days off so you can be there in Knoxville, just in case, or something like that. But the level of lunacy, the over the last even 5, 6, 7, 8 years, prompted by the buckaroos and their ilk and the killing the business kind of thing. No, nobody ever even presented shit like this, even 10 or 12 years ago, that you should have to be able to fucking pry themselves from the grip of insanity.
Yeah, it's good to watch Stan Hansen matches and enjoy them. He's one of the greatest ever. But when you watch them and you see how stiff they are, it shouldn't be, let me emulate that. It should be, oh shit, he's blind as a bat.
Yes.
And he doesn't know what he's doing. Not he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know
where it's going to land.
He doesn't know where it's going to hit when he hits.
And that was part of his aura. But yeah, if you know that a guy is hurt, and it depends also on the situation. If it's the WWE or that level of business, obviously, as soon as you know somebody's hurt, pull them. You got to protect your investment, whatever. If it's on the independents or if it was in the territory days, I've seen guys have perfectly safe matches, even though they were legitimately injured, because you just work around the goddamn injury and do enough to get by with what you needed to do to make sure it didn't disrupt somebody's program or make anybody look bad or whatever, give the people what they wanted so they weren't pissed off, and nobody got hurt. But that was in the days when people actually expected to see a wrestling match and guys working, even though they didn't know that term, as opposed to goddamn gymnastics exhibition, which you kind of can't do unless you got all your appendages 100%. But I mean, there's been, countless incidents through the territory days of guys with broken hands, broken wrists. Hawk was on the goddamn scaffold with a broken, what was it? That's small, the small bone. Well, it was the bone in the ankle that he taped up under the boot. I can't remember the medical term for it, but that's why guys as soon as you'd lock up with them, if your shoulder was hurt, you'd lock up with a guy, you'd say, watch my left shoulder. That's all you need to say, and then nothing that they did would involve your left fucking shoulder. And they wouldn't be giving you bump like dipshit Sling Blade White or whatever his name is, gave the Uranagi to MJF off the top rope and right on his left fucking shoulder, coincidentally the one that's now injured. Anyway, thank you, Chester, for that question. For heaven's sake.
For heaven's sake. It was a good question.
I'm just saying for heaven's sake over the nuttiness of these guys that think that humans can do this shit. And it's phony too. It's phony too when you get a cinder block broken over your fucking head that is calcified bone and flesh, and nothing explodes in your head.
Part of the problem, too, is the expectation of fans, especially certain fans in certain cities or in certain promotions buildings. If everyone in the company toned it back at least a little bit, would that help? Because you can't really tone it back for one person and not everyone else if everyone's going crazy. If there was an effort to tone things back, would it work? Or is it just going to be do whatever you can to get the attention?
I mean, the problem is if you tell everybody to tone everything back, then you have to do your job. You have to give them personality and let them show their personality and book them in a logical and sensible way where you get people over and make stars. You can't just say, okay, don't do everything that you've been doing, but now you're just going to be boring ass indie wrestlers not doing anything because I don't know how to do my job. That's when the booker can say, no more furniture. You're not going to use any more fucking furniture unless I tell you to, and it's going to be sparingly. And there's going to be no blood except when I call for it. And there's going to be goddamn no cussing except when I say you can say goddamn. And there's going to be none of this comedy bullshit where you cooperate with each other in the middle of the fucking match. And there's also going to be no more fucking constant kicking out of every goddamn devastating wrestling move known to man. That's easy, because that was the rules before the past 10 or 15 years to begin with, when we drew big money and lots of people. But the problem is then you have to, as a booker or a matchmaker or whatever, you have to find talent, which has never been in shorter supply. There's plenty of guys, not a lot of talent. And you need to, if not train them properly, find them already trained, which is even harder, properly. And then you need to put them on a television program and make them interesting enough in terms of the reasons for their conflict and their personalities that you expose to the public that people start fucking watching them. And you get ratings upon which people will know who they are, and then they become stars. And that's they're neither trained nor picked nor exposed properly, so they just do bullshit. But it's not hard, again, picking people, you have to see who fits your vision of a fucking promotion. And the people know who we like here, so would it be a bad thing? Just the people that we like. If we said, okay, this promotion will feature Roman Reigns, LA Knight, CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, Jacob Fatu, Gunther. Out of who's on the, is there anybody left at FTR? If they could get their shit together. Would that be a bad promotion? Doesn't look too bad in this day and age.
Depends who's booking. Depends who's booking and depends what the objectives are for the wrestlers. Yeah. The Undertaker got to the point where he wrestled one match a year, give or take, and he would train all year to get there, and he would get hurt and not be able to do anything for another year. Some of these guys today aren't the Undertaker, and they're not wrestling on a WrestleMania main event stage, but their bodies are reacting somewhat similar. You're working a stiff style. It's one thing if this is the big payoff match at WrestleMania at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, whenever. But if it's just, hey, it's Rampage, let's have a hard-hitting match, the fuck are you thinking? There's no one in the building, there's no one watching. Who are you doing it for?
Yourself. Look at Orton. Orton came back after a year and a half, back fusion. He looks great from being in the gym, but you can't tell any difference in his matches. He's not doing anything stupid or anything foolish to risk himself, but he's still doing all the shit that people want to see him do. And if he ain't doing it, they're not noticing. That's working smart when you get the experience and to the level where you need to protect yourself, but you still have value in the ring. That's why it's a work. But you know what all these guys need, don't you, Brian?
Well, I can think of a few things. What do you have in mind?
Well, if you've had a cinder block bashed over the back of your head, if you've been double stomped from off the roof of the Superdome, if you've been wrapped up in barbed wire and slung around like an Argentinian bolo, there's only one thing that's going to make you feel better, and that's CBD from CB Distillery.
Good idea.
I'll tell you what, that's what all these guys need. I don't know if it really regrows brain cells. I think the jury is still out on that. Research is taking place, but CBD from CB Distillery gives you less pain after exercise, and we're certainly talking about that. And it gives you better sleep after you've been awake. And then sometimes you can go to sleep right after you get up on this stuff. I'm telling you.
Well, you'll have the normal energy, but it'll help you. It will aid you with things like getting sleep. And
then you'll wake up and you'll want to sleep again. You go back to sleep and boom, you're so comfortable there. You say, fuck it for the rest of the year.
Not necessarily. Let's not look at it that way. Perhaps while you're awake, you're dealing with some pains and aches from a good day at the gym.
That's more reason to want to go to sleep.
Well, the CB Distillery Fine CBD product will help with the the aches and pains, and of course, with the sleep.
We are not sure, ladies and gentlemen, if it helps with those sores. I mean, you can rub it all around your lips and your anal orifice. I'm not sure if the sores will go away, but you'll get better sleep, and they'll be less sore.
Apply as recommended.
Apply as recommended, not for anal insertion.
No, I don't even know why. No.
Well, you just, that's when you've got a product like that that's a personal grooming or health product or something like that. You need to make sure you put on the warning label, not for anal insertion. That's on all the packages over at the store. CB Distillery has you covered with their full range of carefully formulated CBD and plant-based solutions, none of which are designed to shove up your sphincter, but all of them are designed to help you lead a happier and healthier and easier life. Their healing plant compounds are made with the highest quality, clean ingredients. There's no artificial colors, flavors, or preservationists involved in this stuff.
Preservationists?
Preservatives. That's what it is.
Preservationists.
With over 2 million customers and a 100% money-back guarantee, I'll have you know the CB Distillery is the source to trust. 2 million customers. Imagine, if you go out in public right now in the United States of America, 1 out of every 150 million. 2 million is 300 million people in it. 2 million. 1 out of every 150 people in the country is right now hopped up on the stuff from CB Distillery.
They're not hopped up. They're
happy as clams. They're hopping. They're walking down the street. They're skipping. There's a pep in their step because they're sleeping better. They've got the gift of a calmer mind and better sleep and less pain after exercise or less pain after, being beaten up, physically assaulted. Let's say that, every day you walk home from work or school, and the mean kids, they step out from behind a corner, they turn your pockets inside out, they slap you around a little bit and shove you over in the shrubbery.
Once again, this is for adults over the age of 18.
Well, that's why I'm saying you coming back from work or school.
Work?
Well, you could be going to college. You could be working down on Wall Street. You go around the corner there by the subway stand, and this kid comes out. He fucking slaps you around, shoves you down, kicks you. You've seen these videos on the subway of these random people just walking. So if somebody's kicked the shit out of you today, you take one of these fine products from CB Distillery, you'll feel less pain. So that's just so everybody living in a city next to a subway should have some of this on hand just in case you get the shit kicked out of you on the way home. And with the code JCE, you can now stuff everybody's stocking full of CBD for 20% off. 20% off, no prescription required whatsoever. You don't have to forge anything, ladies and gentlemen. It's a free-for-all. You're just going to get it without paperwork, just as long as you've got money. CB Distillery. You don't know how to spell distillery or how to dispel distillery? Well, here it is, DISTILLERY, cbdistillery.com. Enter the code JCE for 20% off your order so you can stock everybody up with better sleep and peace of mind and tranquility and ecstasy and bliss. You know, if ignorance is bliss, most people should be ecstatic.
Once again, what's that promo code, Jim?
CBDistillery.com, promo code JCE for 20% off.